The snow is still falling when Maeve O'Brien walks out of the reception hall, and she doesn't look back. She can't. If she looks back, she'll see the way Garrett's colleagues are laughing. She'll see his hand already on the small of another woman's back, casual as breathing, the way it used to be on hers. She'll see 200 people pretending not to notice, and she cannot survive that. Not tonight. Her heels sink in the fresh snow on the steps of the Rosemont Grand in downtown Toronto. The cold hits her face like a slap, and honestly, she welcomes it. It is the most honest thing that has happened to her all evening. Inside that ballroom, she spent 3 hours being the perfect partner, smiling at the right moments, laughing at the jokes that weren't funny, standing at Garrett Holloway's side like a well-dressed accessory, nodding along while he told his developer friends about his latest condo project on King Street, about the deals he was closing in Vancouver, about the life he was building. A life he apparently had very specific ideas about, ideas that did not include her. It started with a comment. That's how it always starts. One of his clients, a man in an aggressively expensive watch, had leaned over to Garrett and said something about how lucky he was to have such a devoted partner at home, keeping things running while he built the empire. Garrett had smiled that particular smile, the one that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Maeve's great, he'd said, very supportive. But between us, I need someone with a little more ambition. Someone who wants the same things I want. He said it quietly. He thought he was being discreet, but sound carries strangely in rooms with high ceilings and too much marble, and Maeve heard every word as clearly as if he'd announced it from the podium. She set her champagne glass down on the nearest table, very carefully, very deliberately, and then she picked up her coat from the cloakroom and walked straight out the front door without saying goodbye to a single person. Now she stands on King Street West with no plan whatsoever. The city is doing what Toronto does in February, existing in layers of grey and salt in the particular bone-deep cold that gets into your joints by 7 in the evening. Streetcars hum past. A group of people spill out of a bar down the block, laughing in that loose, easy way that feels like a foreign language tonight. She has nowhere to go. The apartment is Garrett's. Her name isn't on the lease because, as he put it 18 months ago, it just made more sense for him to handle it. She had believed him. She'd believed so many things about Garrett Holloway over 3 years together, chief among them being that when he said he loved her, he meant it the same way she did. She walks without direction, past the restaurants and the glass towers and the people who have somewhere to be. Her coat is good but not good enough for standing still, so she keeps moving. Down King, then left onto a side street she doesn't recognize, and the noise of the city dims slightly. That's when she sees the light. A narrow place wedged between a dry cleaner and a law office, its sign reading Boreal in copper letters above a frosted window. The kind of place you could walk past 100 times and never notice. But the light inside is warm and amber, and Maeve is very, very cold. She pushes open the door. The bar is small and unhurried, with exposed brick and low wooden beams, and exactly the kind of quiet that costs a certain amount of money to maintain. Not flashy money, old money, or the kind that knows better than to announce itself. A few small tables, a longer bar along one wall, jazz coming softly from somewhere Maeve can't identify. A bartender who looks up when she enters and doesn't make a thing of the fact that her mascara is probably not where she left it. "Sit anywhere," he says. His name tag reads Thomas. She takes a small table near the window, as far from the 3 other patrons as she can manage. She does not want conversation. She does not want to exist, actually, but short of that she would like a few minutes to figure out what comes next. Thomas appears without being summoned. "Rough one?" Maeve looks up. That obvious. February in this city, he says, with the generosity of someone who's seen worse and has decided not to mention it. "Can I get you something?" "On me. Just water, and maybe." She stops, laughs a little. "Do you have tea?" He brings her tea and a small bowl of mixed nuts and a look that says he has questions but won't ask them. She appreciates that more than she can say. She sits for a long time. Long enough that the tea goes from scalding to merely warm. She thinks about 3 years. She thinks about the lease and the credit card she has in her own name with a limit that would not survive more than 2 months of Toronto rent. She thinks about her younger brother Declan, who is 17 and staying with their aunt in Hamilton while Maeve works in the city, and who calls her every Sunday without fail, and who is the only reason she has not simply sat down on the sidewalk and refused to get up. She is 29 years old. She has a degree in graphic design she has barely used because Garrett was doing well, and there were always reasons to put her own work off. She has $3,000 in a savings account she opened without telling him, because something in her had always known, some quiet voice she'd spent years talking over, that she needed an exit she could call her own. She is staring at her reflection in the window when she realizes someone is standing near her table. She looks up. The man is tall, and his presence takes up a certain amount of space without him doing anything particular to fill it. He's perhaps late 30s, with dark hair, and the kind of stillness that comes not from ease but from discipline. His jacket is well cut and charcoal grey, and he holds a glass of something amber with the relaxed grip of someone who isn't drinking it so much as thinking near it. He says, "I don't mean to interrupt." His voice is measured, quiet, there's a faint accent underneath it, something from somewhere Maeve can't immediately place. Not local. Not quite. "You're not," she says, which is a lie, but a polite one. "I was at the bar," he says, "and you looked like someone who's had a very specific kind of evening." He doesn't smile when he says it. Doesn't perform concern. He just states it, the way you'd note the weather. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." Maeve's first instinct is the sensible one. "She's fine, thank you, please leave her alone." But something in his tone stops her from delivering it. He doesn't look at her like she's a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be taken. He looks at her like she's a person he noticed. "I'm all right," she says. Mostly is honest, he says. "May I?" He gestures at the chair across from her. She considers. Then she nods. He sits, sets his glass down. "My name is Conrad, Maeve. What happened, Maeve?" If you want to tell it. She doesn't know why she does. Maybe it's the anonymity of strangers, the freedom of speaking to someone who has no stake in your story. Maybe it's just that she's tired of holding it. "I walked out of my partner's work party," she says. "After I heard him tell someone I don't have enough ambition." Conrad is quiet for a moment. "And do you?" The question surprises her. "What?" "Ambition. Do you have it?" "Yes." The word comes out fast and certain, and it surprises her a little, how sure of it she is. "I have plans. I have work I want to do. I kept waiting for the right time, and the right time kept being later. Later is a door that locks itself," Conrad says. Not unkindly, that's a very tidy thing to say. The corner of his mouth moves. Not quite a smile. "I apologize." Occupation. A beat. Development. Of various kinds. Maeve studies him. There's something beneath the composure, something that has weight to it. This is not a man who relaxes easily. But here, in this particular light, he seems to be making an attempt at it. They talk for 2 hours. She doesn't plan to. It simply happens, the way unexpected things do when you've stopped trying to control everything. She tells him about Declan, about the Sunday calls, about the way her brother has been talking about engineering programs in September, and how she has been quietly calculating what that might cost, and whether she could make it work. Conrad listens, really listens, the way that's different from waiting for your turn to speak. He tells her some things in return, that he grew up outside of Ottawa, the son of a man who worked construction until his back gave out, that he came to Toronto at 22 with the specific intention of building something, though he is also vague about the architecture of what he's built. He has a younger sister who lives in Montreal. His mother passed away 2 years ago. He has never married, though there was someone once, and when he mentions it, the sentence closes quickly. The way doors do when the room beyond is private. By midnight, Maeve feels something she cannot quite name. Not better, exactly, but different. Less like she is falling and more like she has landed somewhere unfamiliar but not hostile. "I should find somewhere to stay," she says. "I can't go back to the apartment, not tonight." Conrad reaches into his jacket and places a card on the table between them. It's plain. Just a name, Conrad Sterling, and a number. No title, no company logo. "If you need legal help, a reference, anything," he says, "call that. You don't know me." "I know that you're practical enough to have your own savings and smart enough to know you needed them," he says. "That's sufficient." Maeve picks up the card. She looks at it, she looks at him. "Why?" He considers the question in a way that suggests he takes it seriously. "Because," he says, "the city is a difficult place to be stranded in, and you shouldn't have to be." He stands. He buttons his jacket. He looks at her for a moment with those grey eyes that seem to be calculating something she doesn't have the context for. "Take care of yourself, Maeve," he says. Then he walks out into the February night. She sits alone at the table, the card in her hand. She doesn't know that Conrad Sterling runs the most significant private equity operation in the country, one that reaches into real estate and logistics, and several sectors that don't announce themselves in press releases. She doesn't know that his name carries a weight in certain rooms that makes other powerful people speak more carefully. She doesn't know that by the time she gets to the hotel 3 blocks south, a car she hasn't noticed has already made sure she arrived there safely. All she knows is that for the first time all evening, someone treated her like someone worth treating well. She walks out into the snow with the card in her coat pocket, and she does not feel quite so alone. The hotel room is plain and smells faintly of cleaning product, and she sleeps better in it than she has in months. Garrett calls 18 times before she silences the phone. His texts follow a pattern she recognizes. First concern, then irritation, then the particular kind of apology that's really a request for her to come back and make things easier for him. She reads them with a detachment that surprises her. It's like reading someone else's mail. She does not respond. 4 days later, her savings have absorbed the better part of what she allotted them. The hotel, a new prepaid phone, a few necessities from the drugstore down the street. She's been applying for freelance design contracts online, firing off proposals with the slightly reckless energy of someone who has run out of reasons to wait. She's gotten 2 responses and 1 small job, which paid enough to eat for a week. Progress, she tells herself. Small and slow, but hers. She holds Conrad's card for a long time before she dials. It rings once, then a professional female voice. Sterling Group, how can I direct your call? I'm looking for Conrad Sterling. My name is Maeve O'Brien. He gave me this number. 1 moment, Ms. O'Brien. A pause, and then his voice, unhurried and direct. I was hoping you'd call. Relief moves through her quickly before she can examine it. You remembered. Of course I did. A beat. Where are you? Are you somewhere safe? The question lands differently than she expects. Not procedural, genuinely asked. A hotel downtown. I've been here a few days. She hesitates. I'm fine. I'm figuring things out. But you mentioned legal help, and I think I need advice about a lease situation, and some finances that are complicated because everything's in his name. How soon can you be ready? I'm sorry. I'm sending a car. There are lawyers in my office who handle exactly this kind of situation. You shouldn't be navigating it alone from a hotel room. Conrad. She stops, takes a breath. I don't take things from people I don't know. You're not taking anything, he says. You're accepting an introduction to a law firm. You can decide what to do from there. She looks out the window at the city, grey and familiar and indifferent. She thinks about Declan. She thinks about September. All right, she says. The car that arrives is understated, dark, clean, driven by a quiet man named Augusto, who confirms her name and holds the door with professional courtesy. The drive takes 40 minutes, heading north through traffic, eventually turning into a neighborhood where the houses set back from the road behind mature trees and the occasional iron gate. The building at the end of the driveway is not what she expected. Stone and glass, contemporary and quietly serious, the kind of architecture that doesn't explain itself. Conrad is standing at the entrance when they arrive, in a grey wool coat this time, his hands in his pockets. You look better than 4 days ago, he says when she reaches him. That's a low bar, she says. He almost smiles. Come in. Inside, the space is spare and considered. High ceilings, natural light, art on the walls that she files away to think about later because it's genuinely interesting. A woman named Harriet meets them in the hallway and takes Maeve through to an office where she spends 2 hours with a lawyer named Dennis Firth, who turns out to be exactly the kind of person you want in your corner, thorough, calm, and visibly unimpressed by Garrett's type. By the time she comes out, there is a plan. Not a complete one, but the bones of something she can stand on. Conrad is waiting, not hovering, just present at the far end of the hallway, speaking quietly on his phone. When he sees her, he finishes the call. How are you? He asks. I have a direction, she says. That's more than I had this morning. Good. He gestures toward a room at the end of the hall. I'd like you to meet someone. The room is a sunlit sitting area off the kitchen, and in it, cross-legged on a window seat with a sketchbook open in her lap, is a girl, perhaps 11 or 12, with dark hair in a braid and the specific self-possessed quality of a child who has spent a lot of time with adults. She looks up at Maeve with direct, assessing eyes. They are the same grey as her father's. This is my daughter, Conrad says. Brigid, hi, Brigid says, not shy, not performing friendliness either, just straightforwardly present. I'm Maeve, Maeve says, and sits down without being asked, because something in the girl's posture says she finds adults who stay standing while talking to her slightly tiresome. Brigid glances at her sketchbook, then back up. Do you want to see? Maeve says honestly. The drawing is a map of an imaginary city, detailed and internally consistent, with annotations in a small, careful hand. There are transit lines, a waterfront, distinct neighborhoods with names she's invented. It's the kind of thing that takes a certain kind of mind to make. This is extraordinary, Maeve says. Did you plan it all out first, or did it grow? Brigid blinks. This is apparently not the usual response. It grew, she says. But I go back and add structure after. That's actually a real design methodology, Maeve says. It has a name. Brigid's eyes narrow with interest. What name? Iterative development. You build, then you formalize what you've built. Conrad is watching this exchange from the doorway. His expression is something Maeve can't quite read. Later, when Brigid has been called for her 4 o'clock call with her tutor, Conrad walks Maeve out to the front steps. She doesn't usually show people her work, he says. She's remarkable. She's the only important thing I've done, he says it quietly, without performance. The way people say true things. Maeve pauses. Her mother died when Bridget was 6, he says. Aneurysm. Very sudden. He looks at the middle distance. She's grown up in a complicated world. I've done what I can to make it as ordinary as possible for her, but there are limits. Maeve thinks about Declan at 17, calling every Sunday, growing up faster than she wanted him to. The particular loneliness of children who understand more than adults expect. Can I come back? She says. Not for the lawyers, just to see how she's doing. Conrad looks at her. Yes, he says, you can come back. She does. The weeks that follow are not easy, but they have shape to them, which is more than she had before. The legal process is slow and specific. Garrett, it turns out, does not simply concede. He freezes their joint account, which she expected, and he gives an interview to a mutual friend of theirs with the clear intention of the story spreading, in which he describes Maeve as having had some kind of episode. She finds out through a text from a former colleague who is appalled on her behalf. She sits with the information for a day. Then she goes back to Dennis Firth, and together they begin building a record of everything. The financial arrangement, the isolation that happened so incrementally she barely noticed it happening, the apartment she has no legal claim to despite 3 years of her life spent within its walls. At Conrad's house she falls into a rhythm. Twice a week she meets with the legal team. On other days she works from a small desk in the library that Conrad has quietly made available to her, sending out freelance proposals, completing the 2 small contracts she's landed, building slowly towards something that might be a client list. Bridget appears at the library door with the naturalness of a child who doesn't think twice about whether she's welcome. Maeve never suggests she isn't. They draw together. Maeve shows Bridget the basics of design principles, how the eye moves, how color creates mood. Bridget shows Maeve maps she's been building since she was 8 and a running written account of the fictional city's history. You've been building this for 4 years, Maeve says. Since Mum died, Bridget says very simply. I didn't have anywhere to put things, so I built somewhere. Maeve sets the sketchbook down carefully. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. Bridget looks at her for a moment. Dad says you're brave, she says. Maeve looks up. Does he? He doesn't say it like a compliment. He says it like it's just true. That evening, after Bridget is in bed, Conrad finds Maeve in the library with her laptop and a cold cup of tea. She told you, he says from the doorway. She did. He crosses the room and sits in the chair across from her, which he almost never does. He's usually in motion, always at the edge of departure. Tonight he just sits. She's attached to you, he says. I know. I'm attached to her. Maeve closes the laptop. Is that a problem? No. He looks at her steadily. That's not what I came to say. The room is quiet. The house settles around them. Maeve. His voice is different. Not the measured professional tone she's learned to read. Not the gentleness he reserves for Bridget. I need to tell you something about what I do. Because if you stay... He stops. Starts again. If you continue to be in this house and in my daughter's life, and another stop. I want you to know what you'd be staying in. She waits. He tells her. Not everything, not all at once, but the shape of it. That the Sterling Group is legitimate, largely, in the way that means it intersects with city politics and urban development contracts, in ways that city politics and urban development contracts always do, and that some of what he manages sits in a grey area he has navigated carefully for 15 years. That there are people who owe him things and people he owes, and that the difference between his world and the legal world is often narrower than the legal world would like to admit. That there was a time, younger, when he made choices he has since learned to live with. He doesn't dress it up and he doesn't minimize it. If you want to leave, he says at the end, I will have Augusto take you wherever you need to go, and Dennis will continue to work your case on a deferred basis. No conditions. Maeve is quiet for a long time. I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs, she says finally. I know what it looks like when people make decisions, because the alternative is worse. I'm not here to judge architecture I wasn't part of. Conrad looks at her, really looks, the way people do when they're not sure if they've heard correctly. But, she continues, I won't pretend I don't know, and I won't let Bridget be confused about who her father is if it ever comes to that. Fair, he says. She looks at him. Okay then. The thing between them doesn't announce itself. It builds the way most real things do, not in a single decisive moment, but in accumulation. The way he makes sure there's always tea in the library when she arrives. The way she starts leaving a jacket over the chair by the door, and nobody mentions it, but it stays. The way Bridget starts calling her Maeve with the particular ease of a child who has decided you belong. One night in late March, Conrad comes home to find Maeve and Bridget asleep on the living room couch, an animated film playing to no one on the television, Bridget's head on Maeve's shoulder. He stands in the doorway for a long moment. Then he gets a blanket from the hall closet and covers them both and does not wake either of them. Maeve knows he did this because the blanket is there when she opens her eyes. She is not supposed to cry about a blanket. She cries a little anyway. The crisis comes on a Tuesday night, which is when crises in her experience have always preferred to arrive. Her phone rings at 11:30, unknown number, and something makes her answer it. The voice on the other end is male, clipped, and unmistakably threatening in the specific way of someone who has been paid to be. He knows her name. He knows she's been staying at an address she hasn't given anyone from her old life, and he makes it clear that Garrett Holloway would very much like the situation with the apartment and the joint finances resolved in a manner more convenient for Garrett Holloway. She's barely hung up when Conrad appears in the hallway, already on his own phone, his face closed in the expression she has learned means something is being handled. "How did they get this number?" she asks. "Garrett has been doing some research," he says. "He found out where you are. My information suggests he's been watching the address for several days. The ground shifts. Bridget is safe. My people have been maintaining a perimeter." He looks at her directly. "I didn't want to alarm you before I had to." She takes a breath. "Let it out." "What do? We give him what he wants to find," Conrad says. The plan is calm in its design. Garrett's people have been looking for a point of entry, a moment when Maeve is accessible outside the house, when they can approach her without Conrad's team intervening. Conrad's people have been watching them watch. They decide to give them a window. "Maeve doesn't love this. She says so. You won't be more than 10 feet from Augusto at any point," Conrad tells her. "And I'll be watching from the car. That's the part that bothers me," she says. "Not the danger. The fact that you'll be 10 feet away and I'll have to act like I don't know you're there." He looks at her for a moment. "I know I can," she says. "I've been acting fine for 3 years." Something moves across his face. "Maeve, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she says. "Because I am not going back. And I want this over." It happens on a Wednesday afternoon in a coffee shop near Bloor Street that is populated enough to look natural but quiet enough for what's coming to be controlled. Maeve sits at a window table with a flat white and her laptop and waits. They come in 20 minutes, 2 of them not in black this time, dressed carefully like ordinary people, which is its own kind of telling. The one who sits across from her without asking is thickset and watchful. He smiles without warmth. "Ms. O'Brien," he says. "We've been hoping to talk." "I'm sure you have," Maeve says. Her voice is steady. She is faintly amazed at herself. The man begins to explain calmly the arrangement Garrett has in mind. She will sign off on the contested accounts. She will leave the lease matter. She will stop talking to lawyers. This will be, he implies, much easier on everyone. "And if I don't?" she says. He smiles again. What happens next takes approximately 45 seconds. Augusto materializes from the counter where he has been ordering nothing in particular. 2 other people she hadn't consciously registered as part of the room stand up from their tables. The 2 men find themselves efficiently separated from their phones and their momentum, and the manager, who has apparently been briefed, appears with a quiet expression and a closed sign for the door. In the car outside, she knows, Conrad is on the phone with people she won't be introduced to, ensuring that the evening's footage and the men's employment history and the chain of instructions leading back to Garrett Holloway is being organized into something that Dennis Firth can use. It takes 8 days from that afternoon for the legal picture to shift significantly. What Garrett did not know, what his lawyers did not tell him, possibly because they hadn't thought to look, is that the financial arrangement he'd established with Maeve over 3 years constituted a form of economic control that is, under certain interpretations of Ontario family law, very uncomfortable to defend publicly. Dennis presents this to Garrett's team on a Thursday morning with the quiet efficiency of someone who has been waiting patiently for this meeting. By the end of the following week, Garrett Holloway has agreed to a settlement. Full value of her share of the household assets, her name cleared from any implication in his preferred narrative, and the kind of legal separation that comes with a confidentiality clause that protects her far more than it protects him. Maeve gets the news by phone standing on the front steps of Conrad's house in the early April cold. She hangs up and stands there for a moment. The maple trees along the driveway have tiny new buds on them, so small you'd miss them if you weren't looking. She hears the door behind her. Conrad comes to stand beside her. Not close enough to presume, just close enough to be there. "It's done," she says. "I know. Dennis called me first to ask if it was all right to tell you." "You told him yes?" "Obviously." She turns to look at him. He is looking at the trees. His profile in the afternoon light is very serious and very tired, and something else she has been carefully not naming for weeks. "I've been thinking," she says, "about what comes next." "What does?" "Declan gets to come back to Toronto. I can afford a place if I take on another 2 or 3 clients, which I have the start of." She looks down at her hands. I was thinking about maybe keeping working from here if that's something that works. A pause. Working from here, Conrad says, very carefully. Or, she says, staying, generally. Another pause, the kind that fills itself up. Brigid would like that, he says. What about you? He looks at her, those grey eyes that she's been learning to read for months. I've wanted to ask you something, he says, since approximately the first week you were here. I didn't, because the timing was wrong, and now? The timing is better, he says. Not perfect. I'm not sure my life does perfect, but better. Conrad, she says. Yes, just ask me. He turns to face her, straightens slightly, the way he does when he's committing to something. Stay, he says. Not as a guest. Not as someone I'm helping. Stay because you want to be here. Because I want you here. Because my daughter lights up in a way I haven't seen in 6 years, and because… He stops. The composure slips, just briefly. Because I think about you constantly, and I would very much like to stop wondering if that's permitted. Maeve O'Brien, who spent 3 years making herself smaller and quieter and less inconvenient, and who walked out of a reception hall in February into the snow with nowhere to go and just enough stubbornness to keep going, looks at this man who found her in a bar and never once tried to make her anything other than what she already was, and says, "It's permitted." He kisses her then, on the steps of a house that has been a house without quite being a home, and the maple trees do nothing dramatic. No music, no dramatic light, just the ordinary miracle of two people who found each other in a city that wasn't trying to help them. Summer at the Sterling house is loud in a way it apparently wasn't before. Declan arrives in June, the week after school ends, with 2 duffel bags and the specific calibrated suspicion of a 17-year-old boy meeting his sister's situation for the first time. He shakes Conrad's hand with a firmness that is clearly deliberate. Conrad, to his credit, shakes back with equivalent gravity and offers him a room and access to the workshop at the back of the property where various mechanical projects have apparently been started and abandoned over the years. By the end of the second day, Declan and Brigid are arguing companionably about the fictional city's transit infrastructure, and Declan has found something in the workshop that he's now determined to fix. Maeve watches this from the kitchen window and feels something she hasn't felt since she was very small, the sense of being in the right place. The client list grows slowly. She picks up a brand identity contract in July, a small publishing house in August. Word travels when the work is good and her work is good. She has her own account, her own income, her name on things. Conrad never mentions the money she pays in rent. She insists. He accepts, eventually, with the slightly pained expression of someone being reasonable against their instincts. On a Saturday evening in late August, when the city is finally warm enough to sit outside, they are all on the back terrace. Brigid drawing, Declan on his phone, Augusto somewhere at the edge of the property being discreet, Maeve with a glass of white wine and Conrad beside her with his arm along the back of her chair. "Maeve," Brigid says, without looking up from the sketchbook. "Yes? I've been thinking about what to call you." Maeve sets, her glass down. Conrad goes very still. "What are you thinking, Maeve?" says carefully. Brigid looks up. Her grey eyes are direct and serious and slightly amused, which is a combination Maeve has come to love. "Maeve," she says, "I'm just going to keep calling you Maeve, but I wanted you to know that's what I'm choosing. Not because I have to, because I want to." Maeve breathes out slowly. "I'd like that," she says. "Okay." Brigid goes back to the sketchbook. "Also, I've decided the city needs a botanical garden. Can you help me design it next week?" "Yes," Maeve says. Conrad's hand moves from the chair back to her shoulder. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. Declan, without looking up from his phone, says, "This family is weird." "Yes," Conrad agrees. "Okay," Declan says, and keeps scrolling. Maeve leans back into the warmth beside her and looks at the August sky, at the city glittering just beyond the trees. She thinks about a February night when she walked out into the snow, not knowing what came next. She thinks about the particular stubbornness it takes to keep moving when you have nowhere to go, and how that stubbornness, ugly and unglamorous as it was, turned out to be the truest thing about her. She thinks about the things she's built since then, the contracts, the client list, the savings, the small and growing structure of a life that is entirely her own. And she thinks about what it means to choose freely and clearly, to build that life alongside someone else. In the distance, a streetcar bell, the lake somewhere, Invisibeing itself. Loud, difficult, abundant. Maeve smiles and stays.